we have two really amazing journalists and kind of technologists in their own right as well, here to speak with us about best practices for startups when contacting the media, kind of opening that black box of journalism and PR as well. I'll introduce each of the mentors, and then I'll bring them up individually to speak for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions from the society members. First up, we have Walter Thompson. He's an award-winning independent journalist based in San Francisco. He was previously editorial manager at TechCrunch, a leading digital publication covering technology and entrepreneurship in the US and really around the world. At TechCrunch, he managed the site's guest contributor program, which includes opinion pieces from startup founders and investors that appear on TechCrunch Plus and TechCrunch. His work has appeared in The Guardian, San Francisco Magazine, Alta Journal, and Hoodline, just to name a few. We're really happy to have Walter with us. And before I bring Walter on, I'd also like to introduce David Smooke, who is the founder and CEO of HackerNoon, one of the leading news publications for technologists and tech enthusiasts that counts over 4 million monthly readers. Over the past 7 years, David has led the company's growth trajectory, raising millions of dollars in venture funding, securing thousands of clients from startups to leading technology corporations, and publishing stories from tens of thousands of contributing writers. Before founding his company, David worked as the director of content marketing for Smart Recruiters. We'll go ahead and bring up Walter first, and then David. Walter, if you'd like to share your screen, I'm really happy to do so. If not, sir, no worries either.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me here today. Actually, I did not do an official deck. I just kind of wrote some notes today, so no screen to share. Sorry about that.
All good.
And apologies. I had a big week today. I launched my podcast on Monday, and then Sunday I contracted COVID, so I'm a little slow. So you're here today.
Sorry about that, and congrats at the same time.
Thanks. Just glad to be here. Yeah. So I have an interesting. I think it's interesting, I guess. I spent most of my career working in startups before I actually transitioned and became a journalist. So I've kind of sat on both sides of the table when it comes to media and PR and trying to find your way into that whole ecosystem. And one thing I will say is this, like the whole idea of encouraging entrepreneurs to become storytellers is a bit of a cliche, but it's actually true. You will need to create a cohesive narrative around you and your product or service before you enter the marketplace, just the same way you need to do the same thing to get an investor to back you. So today I want to talk about some of the basic principles for generating positive coverage and also some thoughts on how to interact with reporters once you've actually gotten the access. And the first thing first is that if you've raised money from an investor, that might be enough to make your company newsworthy in some circles. Most reporters are looking for the same sort of social proofs that investors seek. So what problem is your company looking to solve? Is your solution feasible? And then lastly, why is your team the right one to solve this problem or to take on this problem? And that last part is really key. You need to find concrete, tangible ways to make yourself the hero of this three-part story as far as problem, solution, and then team. But overarching that, I think the bigger thing I would say is the most important thing when it comes to actually getting your foot in the door and actually getting positive coverage to your company. It's not transactional. It's not I give you a pitch or I give you a tip and then you write about my company. The whole media PR thing, in my experience, is very much relationship based. And I'm not saying that to characterize it as good or bad. I'm just saying that's kind of just how it is. And I'm saying that because, I think people think that when they have a story in mind or when they're ready to go to market, when they're ready to get some press for themselves. A lot of people that they start with kind of cold calling, just kind of like sending out emails to reporters who they think write about them. And that kind of spray and pray approach, it really rarely results in coverage. In fact, actually, it's one of those things. Journalists, like the journalists I used to work with, we would trade on Slack every day, like the cheesiest, most least creative pitches we got, and we'd laugh about them because people want to pass the time, and not to be cruel, but it's just like some people just really would submit just really terrible pitches that they thought would be provocative or interesting. You wouldn't believe how many times in a day I got a pitch that was basically had another reporter's name and another publication on it because they were just sending them out so quickly and using a template. It's so take your time. If you can establish yourself as a domain expert or somebody who actually has, or a reliable source, over time, you're much more likely to get the engagement you're seeking. So yeah, cold pitches are just really ineffective. They're not a good use of your time. They're not going to generate the coverage you're looking for. It's really about building relationships. And so I would say some of those ways, not actually heavy lifts as far as how to build a relationship. There's a service called Help a Reporter Out. It's called HARO, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You can register yourself, and then if you see, and everybody, you'll see a newsletter basically of reporters who are looking for answers to questions that are totally outside their expertise, even if they have a beat on something like biotech or some aspect of technology. They still might have like a gap in their background as far as like how to explain the technology or how something works or some advanced kind of questions. So they go to services like HARO and look for people who have expertise who can actually answer questions and be a good source. That's one really good way of meeting, engaging yourself with the journalistic community and presenting yourself as a domain expert. Another way, mentioned before, I used to work for the last 4 years. I was working at TechCrunch and I was managing the guest contributor program, which is basically op-eds. So op-eds that were opinion articles about topics in the public interest that were technology related. But then the other side were basically business related articles that were basically people sharing how-tos and kind of explaining how they solved common business problems that a lot of early stage startups had to contend with for fundraising or how to price their software products or marketing issues. And what I found was basically a lot of people who didn't think of themselves as storytellers, but they actually had these stories because, like, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to go through these things as far as sitting across from an investor and trying to gain their trust and get them to give you a check, or trying to hire somebody or trying to fire somebody. And so I was able to kind of find, like, by asking people, like, about their experience, like, what do you have that is useful to somebody else that you could share? Like, and I would actually, people, and it's kind of funny, you'll probably hear a lot of people talk about thought leadership. And I have a very contrarian opinion about that. I don't think thought leadership is valuable to readers. I think thought leadership is valuable to the person who is putting the thoughts forward because it burnishes their credentials and makes them look authoritative and good and like a good investment. Really, thought leaders are not, it's good to try to be helpful. Don't try to be a thought leader. Try to share something that will actually create value and help someone solve a problem, not just make yourself look good. That's what reporters are looking for. Might be cheesy. Launch a podcast, speak publicly, send reporters commentary on something they wrote. It doesn't even have to be about your company. This is actually a good example. I know of a founder who spotted an error in an article about one of their competitors. They contacted the reporter and explained, here's why you were a little off in this whole thing. And that actually established them as an expert in that reporter's eyes. And so when they were going back and writing about other things in that sector, that reporter knew to talk, oh, this person's a resource, they're helpful and good. And they weren't coming at me to promote themselves. They're coming at me to actually be helpful. That's valuable. And that's the kind of thing that actually will get you the interactions you're looking for with reporters. First couple of minutes, very positive and aspirational. So I want to end with a list of don'ts. Like I said before, don't email every journalist. Before you pitch, do build a spreadsheet with names of reporters who've written about your company. Do email them individually, each one. Don't use generative AI to craft your pitch. Try to do this in a thoughtful, slow, sensible basis so that you basically can give every reporter time to respond before you move on to the next. Don't just dump it out there and email 50 reporters in the same email thread. It's not really going to be, they're not going to see it as valuable for them. Don't exaggerate or lie. We will always find out, and it's not going to be good for you. If you offer a reporter an exclusive, stick to that commitment. And remember that anything you say to a reporter, a journalist, can be published. Anything. So if you want to be off the record, you must say so and get them to agree before you disclose the thing you want to be off the record. On the record is just exactly what it sounds like. There's also not for attribution, meaning you can say something, but they can only identify you in general terms, like a entrepreneurial minded student at a Ivy League university. That would be like not for attribution. On background, it's when they can quote an anonymous source. They quote the source anonymously and it's only paraphrased. And then lastly, off the record, which is exactly what it sounds like. The information you give the reporter is not for publication, but it could be used as a point of investigation for another story or to verify a fact. Just so you know, just the last thing I want to say, it's really unlikely that you're ever going to read the entire story you're in before it's published. Asking for a preview makes you look defensive to a reporter. And I would just say this, if you practice good interview hygiene, you won't have anything to worry about as far as the final product. So just, again, try to be intentional, try to find ways. Again, it's not easy. It's work, and it's a long process of building something, relationships. But if you put the work in, I promise it'll pay off, because building relationships is really the only way you're going to get positive coverage and actually get to know reporters who will want to get to know you as well. Yeah, thanks again for your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Walter. No, great presentation. Thanks for your talk. Before we take those questions from Walter as well, I did want to bring on David Smooke, who is the CEO of HackerNoon, to speak for a few minutes as well. David, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been good to hear everyone's talks here. Walter, congratulations on the new podcast and leaving TechCrunch. It's nice to see you in the same room here. I was thinking hearing the story of like when to start your company, and when to make the leap. I did 2 years part-time before I went full-time on HackerNoon. And, so I've been at this really 9 years, pretty long time. And we found a nice niche in terms of between social media and traditional media. As social media kind of rose up, everyone became a source. And that is a lot more of great opportunity for an entrepreneur, but it also throws you into all the noise and just your voice is kind of equal with everybody else. So at HackerNoon, we provide a professional editor and we reject half of the stories. But at the end of the day, it's between self-publishing and pitching a reporter and having them write about you. So it's just looking through some of this, and thinking, wow, here I am at Yale, a school I couldn't get into, talking to entrepreneurs, and you guys are, some of the elite here, and you're choosing to say, I'm going to get into entrepreneurship. And my message to you is, once you get into it, you're completely equal and your degree is absolutely meaningless. Maybe it matters to some investors, but in terms of actually getting customers and growing your business, it's going to come down to the work you actually do and how it compares to the other offerings in the marketplace. So some of me thinks you're brave and some of me thinks you're stupid, of saying, hey, this expensive degree I just got, I'm going to go into a profession where I can make it worth nothing, and that's I find a little bit of a beauty in that. So hats off to you guys. Keep going, keep building, definitely. When it comes to media, to me, it's more about building up your rate of publishing and your quality of publishing, because your business comes first and your media comes second. And hopefully your media follows your business and you get media because of the good work you're doing, but it's usually not going to feel like enough. You're going to feel like you're doing more work than the attention that you get. And you have to be okay with that feeling. And you have to be okay with taking smaller incremental steps to get more coverage about your business and tell your story. And it's not going to come all at once. Like, just because you got funding doesn't mean anyone cares. There's definitely some elements that a reporter, sorry,
David, that wasn't for you. My apologies.
Okay.
For the other David, just sorry about that.
Yeah. So thinking more about what to do next with your business and how to get more media, I would look at what is interesting about your own story. And I actually kind of gravitate a little more towards making your customers or your contributors the hero as opposed to yourself. But that's also just because I haven't been as good at doing that and making myself the hero. I think the individual stories for me are the hero, and HackerNoon has a lot of stories, and most of the links that talk about HackerNoon, they're actually talking about content on HackerNoon and not HackerNoon the company, which kind of puts me in a different spot. But it's also, every business is like that. If your business has usage and adoption, it's the people using the product that are the aggregate story of what your company is. And You can try to play stories and build relationships, and that'll frame it a little bit, but it's just within the whole usage of your product and the internet talking about it. So I really look at like trying to build up, like how many updates are you doing a day? How many long form posts you're doing? To me, writing is a way of clear thinking. And if you do not have good writing, you do not have clear thinking. Like they're things that exist, they can't exist independent of each other, in my opinion. The other great thing about writing more as an entrepreneur is you're refining your own thinking. So setting goals of just writing more per day, I think will end up leading to more media coverage about you, because you'll understand your story better and where you exist in the market. But tangibly, as an entrepreneur, the only goal you really made was write more each day. And so it becomes a little more attainable than some of these pitches and building relationships that they're very long-term games. And you may know someone for 5 years before they write one story about you, or you may not even know the person who writes the next story about you. And that would be great, but that's a little bit of luck. And it's the aggregation of all your work, and you can't expect it to just happen. So as you come with these spots of like, how do you spend time getting media? It's always going to feel like a second job. Your business is always going to feel like your first one, making payroll, making revenue, getting your team motivated. That stuff's always going to come first. So you have to find a good balance of like how to weave into your day about how to be more active on media and get involved with reporters and make, long-term relationships. So yeah, my advice is to keep going and grind it out. Like I'm a stubborn person, and I think that stubbornness is an entrepreneur's best friend in a lot of ways.
Awesome, David. Great presentation. I couldn't agree more. I think it's a great exercise for anybody to write, whether it's something that you put out there or just kind of keep personally, because it does kind of set your head straight as an entrepreneur as well. So fantastic feedback. We'll go ahead and open up for questions for either David or Walter or both. Phil, Puyi as well. David, anybody want to start off with a question for either of our mentors? Yeah, go ahead, David. I think you're on mute too.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentations. Those were awesome. Really love to hear that. So, moving forward, of course, there's all types of new technology coming out, and it's, always difficult to predict the future, but how do you think AI might change the social media, PR, and really just media in general landscapes?
First of all, spam is through the roof. It's easier than ever to spam people, and that is very annoying. So at HackerNoon, we're using AI tools to measure AI writing, and we're using AI to give the editor and the writer that reads your content. It gives you 5 recommendations of headlines that could be better, based on our past library and the content that you wrote. But usually the human can still write a better headline. And I think, human authenticity will go up in value over time as there's more bots and AIs kind of floating around. I think right now in media, it's still more improving your workflow is a more valuable use of AI than creating content. But the leaps that it's made from input to output to create content in the last year are absolutely remarkable. And like creating images is like 10 years ago, when I was managing Smart Recruiter's blog with 400 contributors and we had no budget to buy images for all these blog posts, it was really annoying to not be able to make an original image and have to always do something extra and add it to my job to do it. So like, the idea that you can write one good prompt and have one good original images, or maybe you have to write 3 good prompts to get one good original image, is a huge difference in the blogging space. And it gives your site more of an overall feel. If you use a good prompt like diction, language, and consistency, all the images on your site are going to feel more like one brand. So I'm waiting and seeing. I'm curious what Walter thinks of what AI is doing to us now.
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, I think I do agree with you. I think the human output is generally better quality right now, and probably will be for some time. What I've been using, I mean, so when I was working at TechCrunch, we onboarded an analytics tool that was AI powered in the back end. And I only really found it useful in that it did something called a content helpfulness analysis, where it would basically parse your text and spit out a result as far as like, was this helpful to the reader, as far as like, and it was pretty good as far as the quality of the summary, but it didn't necessarily tell me anything I didn't know. Like if you were an editor who had put the story together, you would have seen all the same things that the AI saw going in on the front end. So it was like the only really useful thing was after an article was written, it would spit out, here's some suggested headlines you can use in social media. And that was actually a time saver because it was based on my excellent headline. And honestly, creating headlines to repackage your content on social media, it's kind of boring work that like doesn't take a lot of creative thought. Here's the thing I would say about generative AI is that it's not good, it's not bad. I think it's just basically, it's the average of everything, right? So it's never going to blow your socks off because it's just the average of everything, which can make it, it's a tuna fish sandwich. It's fine. But it's not gonna, like, I'm not gonna like, you got to go try this tuna fish sandwich. It's amazing because it's like the best tuna fish sandwich in the world is going to be fine, I think. So it's kind of like that for me. That's the analogy I would use.
David, if you wanted to follow up as well, I was going to piggyback. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that sounds super interesting. So it seems like both of you think it's a solid tool, but not yet, and probably never going to replace the human authenticity component.
Here's what I would say. This is dumb. So before I worked in tech journalism, I worked as a local journalist here in San Francisco, and my zone included Ocean Beach, all the way out, like, people surf and so forth. And there's an article one day where there's a beach cleanup at Ocean Beach, where the band Metallica, like all those guys who live locally, they were doing a beach cleanup, and so the headline I came up with was "Enter Sandmen." Now, I think that's pretty good, and I got a lot of great feedback on that, right? But I don't see how generative AI could ever have come up with that headline. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just don't think it's not, we're not there yet. And so it's got real limitations. If you want to just basically, like, fill some column inches of stuff that sounds okay, but doesn't really excite anyone, it's fine. But I don't think it's generative AI it's not going to be like, the letter from your grandmother telling you how proud she is of you. You're never going to be that moved, I don't think, by anything. Not for a while. It's gonna be a long time.
Yeah, I would add, our business is publishing text. That's like our primary focus. But the use cases we found for the AI growths haven't really been as much text. Like, we had a project where we introduced 22 categories atop our 35,000 tags. And how do you put the 35,000 tags into the 22 categories? Now, that's a great one for a large language model. It can very accurately say, this is the tag, and I can make the case why it belongs in one category or another. And we have to make 35,000 choices, which I don't want to do. So that was a use case where, like, AI was awesome, and it added a layer of categorization on top of our content, and it was a great use case, but it has nothing to do with generative. So it's the use cases we're still finding. Like, logo creation is getting pretty good. I'm a little more bullish on the image creation than the text creation. And it's definitely changing our lives, but I'm with Walter that the humans are still better writers. And even if they're not better writers, there's a psychological effect of you want to hear from another human. And that will remain true as humans evolve. We don't want to hear from a machine as much as we want to hear from a human. And that psychological effect, even if the quality gets completely equal, if we believe it's from a machine and not a person, we're going to lose trust in it.
Gotcha. I'm curious as well, Walter, you said, actually, both of you guys have a little bit of background working at companies as well before. Is there anything, in thinking back to your days working on kind of the marketing side, is there anything that you think right now that AI is useful for marketers or for founders who are trying to reach out to the media without kind of crossing that line and creating a full, pitch out of using ChatGPT and nothing original? Is there anything that you do think it is useful for right now that they can leverage?
I mean, if I may, like, I would trust, and I use the word trust lightly, I would trust, like, ChatGPT to give me a list of journalists who have written about generative AI from a critical perspective in the last 3 months. Like, I would, and then it would give me a list, and then I could look at that list and like do a couple of checks on the list to see like, and then I would know what like, and so there's some ways I think directionally that I could use AI in my work to kind of save some time or to aggregate information that's already out there. But at the same time, I also like I know that like whatever I get, I have to rigorously check for quality and accuracy because the AI can hallucinate, and that's and you know I don't want to be putting stuff out there that's fake. So like I got to make sure I'm vetting the work it produces.
Right.
Yeah, I think building lists is really useful. Building relevant lists, it can do that. We've been using Seamless on the marketing and sales side. They have a massive database of emails. So then once you build the list, you target it more and more, and you can build a email list for cold outreach. Also, I mean, spinning up landing pages and decks faster and more efficiently, marketers and it's worth it. You know, because there's a few tools, like in terms of landing pages, I've been using Versal's AI tool, and I can describe what type of landing page I want, and then it actually builds the code, and I can then move the code over to a developer and a designer. So now I'm moving from prompts to HTML, which is really nice in terms of getting a page out quickly and getting the outline of my idea there. And instead of passing off a design file, I'm actually passing off code, and it's in the same amount of time. So that I think is something that like I would definitely look towards in building decks. It's just a good deck is still done by a human, but the idea of like speeding, you write the script of the deck and it makes it flow a little better and gives you a little better imagery. It's just much faster than it was, you know, even with a Canva tool or a Google Sheets tool. So more quickly, you have a new offering that you want to have, and you have a meeting coming up with your lead, you can just have a deck custom to them and the offering a little quicker. So I think on that image creation and code creation side of it, you can save a good bit of time in your workflow.
Awesome. Yeah, and that translates to founders as well. I mean, for a pitch deck, you know, save a bunch of time there as well. So, well, I know we started a little bit late. We held you guys past the time. It's getting later there in Colorado and in California. So I wanted to thank both of our mentors, Walter Thompson, for staying with us, and he has COVID too. So another a big round of applause for him, and congrats again, Walter, on the launch of the new podcast. And as well, David Smooke, CEO of HackerNoon. Thank you both, gentlemen, for speaking with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Thanks.
All right, take care, everybody.